See, Google is always the easiest solution, as much as we hate to admit it. It just takes a simple Google search, and most of your problems have been solved, at least to the best degree that humanity can generally solve a problem. Okay, hello guys. We're reading George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. So first, I want to talk about who this guy is. Um, so Hegel is a German man. Um, we'll actually just do some research on Google. As I was saying earlier, Google is a better source than taking people's word for it, because if it's been documented, it's probably been edited, etc., etc. You get the gist. Okay, so let's do a bit of reading on who Hegel is. Who is Hegel? I have no clue, guys. Okay, George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Too many words. Too many words. Okay, there we go. This is good enough. Wikipedia coming through. I know it's true because you can't really get that much wrong on Wikipedia. Come on, guys. Okay, George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, from the 27th of August 1770 to the 14th of November 1831, was a German philosopher and one of the most influential figures of German idealism and 19th century philosophy. His influence extends across the entire range of contemporary philosophical topics, from metaphysical issues in epistemology and ontology to political philosophy, the philosophy of history, the philosophy of art, philosophy of religion, and the history of philosophy. Born in 1770 in Stuttgart, Holy Roman Empire, during the transitional period between the Enlightenment and the Romantic movement in the Germanic regions of Europe, Hegel lived through and was influenced by the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars. Let's get some pictures there. This is what this dude was seeing. Brutal, brutal. French Revolution, off with their heads. Lots of change in empires and who's ruling who. His fame rests chiefly upon the phenomenology of spirit, what we're reading today, the science of logic, and the teleological account of history, and his lectures at the University of Berlin on topics from his Encyclopedia of the Philosophical Sciences. Okay, we're not going to read all of this. That's just a good idea of his existence, what it's like. So imagine you're seeing what this dude is seeing. And now this dude is coming into the picture after thousands of years of philosophy. Well, yeah, if you want to go back to like before Christ's time, there was like the pre-Socratics and stuff. Um, Descartes came around. He said his spiel about "I think, therefore I am." We just had this dude named Immanuel Kant come by, and he's like, "Yeah, there's different types of knowledge. There's knowledge that we know before experience, and then knowledge that we know after experience. And you need the pre-experiential knowledge to form anything of the post-experiential knowledge, such as like concepts of space and time. And then within that framework, you can see everything." So that's where Hegel's at, and he's just like, bro, what? Um, Now he's gonna come into the picture, and this is what he has to say. This is the Phenomenology of Spirit preface by George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. In the preface to a philosophical work, it is customary for the author to give an explanation, namely, an explanation of his purpose in writing the book, his motivations behind it, and the relations it bears to other previous or contemporary treatments of the same topics. But for a philosophical work, this seems not only superfluous, but in light of the nature of the subject matter, even inappropriate and counterproductive. or whatever it might be suitable to say about philosophy in a preface, for instance, to give some historical instruction about the biases and the standpoint of the text, or some talk about the general content and the results together with a set of scattered assertions and assurances about the truth. None of these can count as the way to present philosophical truth. Moreover, because philosophy essentially is in the element of universality, which encompasses the particular within itself, it might seem that even more so than in other sciences, in philosophy, what is indeed salient about its subject matter, even its perfect essence, would be expressed in the goal of the work and in its final results, and that the way that the project is in fact carried out would be what is inessential. In contrast, if a person were to have only a general notion of, for example, anatomy, or to put it roughly, if he were to have an acquaintance with the part of the body taken in accordance with their lifeless existence, nobody would thereby think that he has come into full possession of the salient subject matter of that science, which is to say, its content. One would think that in addition, he would have to go through the trouble to pay attention to the particularities of the science. Furthermore, that kind of an aggregation of little bits and pieces of information has no real right to be called science, and a conversation about its purpose and other such generalities would be in no way distinct from the ordinary historical and uncomprehending way in which the content, or these nerves and muscles and so forth, is itself discussed. In the case of philosophy, on the other hand, this would give rise to the following incongruity, namely, that if philosophy were indeed to make use of such a method, then it would have shown itself to be incapable of grasping the truth. 2. Determining the relation that a philosophical work professes to bear via the other efforts at dealing with the same object also introduces an extraneous interest, and it thereby only renders obscure what is supposed to be at stake in taking cognizance of this truth. The more that conventional opinion holds that the opposition between the true and the false is itself fixed and set, the more that it customarily expects to find itself in either agreement or in contradiction with any given philosophical system, and, if so, then in any explanation of such a system, the more it will only see the one or the other. It does not comprehend the diversity of philosophical systems, of the progressive development of truth, as much as it sees only contradiction in that diversity. The bud disappears when the blossom breaks through, and one might say that the former is refuted by the latter. Likewise, through the fruit, the blossom itself may be declared to be a false existence of the plant, since the fruit emerges as the blossom's truth, as it comes to replace the blossom itself. Those forms are not only distinguished from each other, but, as incompatible with each other, they also supplant each other. However, at the same time, their fluid nature makes them into moments of an organic unity, in which they are not only not in conflict with each other, but rather, one is equally as necessary as the other, and it is this equal necessity which alone constitutes the life of the whole. However, in part, contradiction with regard to a philosophical system does not usually comprehend itself in this way, and, in part, the consciousness which apprehends the contradiction generally neither knows how to free the contradiction from its one-sidedness, nor how to sustain it as freestanding. Nor when it seems to be in the shape of a struggle against itself does it generally take cognizance of the moments as reciprocally necessary. 3. Those who demand both such explanations and their satisfactions may well look as if they are really in pursuit of what is essential. Where else could the inner core of a philosophical work be better expressed than in its purposes and results, and how else could this be more determinately discerned than by differentiating it from all the other things that this age brings out in the same sphere? However, much that sort of doing is supposed to count for more than just the beginning of cognition, or, if it is supposed to count as actual cognition itself, Still, it is in fact to be reckoned as being little more than a contrivance for avoiding what is really at stake, or an attempt to combine the semblance of both seriousness and effort while actually sparing oneself of either seriousness or effort. This is so because the subject matter is not exhausted in its aims. Rather, it is so because the subject matter is not, rather, it is exhaustively treated when it is worked out. Nor is the result which is reached the actual whole itself. Rather, the whole is the result together with the way the result comes to be. The aim for itself is the lifeless universal, in the way that the tendency of the work itself is a mere drive that still lacks actuality. The unadorned result is just the corpse that has left the tendency behind. So Hegel's saying here that the whole of the work is the essential part of it. So the results that we come to are merely a segment of the truth, which lies in the entirety of the philosophical project from start to finish. So he's saying that the problem with the preface is it tries to outline substantive parts without realizing that the substance of each part comes from each moment that created the moment that we are in right now. Okay, where are we here? Nor is the result which is reached the actual whole itself. Rather, the whole is the result together with the way that the result comes to be. The aim for itself is the lifeless universal in the way that the tendency of the work itself is a mere drive that still lacks actuality. The unadorned result is just the corpse that has left the tendency behind. Likewise, differentiatedness is instead the limit of the thing at stake. It is where the thing which is at stake ceases, or it is what the thing is not. To trouble oneself with such purposes or results, or to make distinctions and pass judgments on one or the other, is thus an easier task than it might seem to be. Instead of occupying itself with what is at stake, this kind of doing has always thereby gone one step beyond it. Instead of dwelling on the thing at issue and forgetting itself in it, that sort of knowing is always grasping at something else. It instead remains in being at one with itself as it is at one with the matter at issue, and gives itself over to it. The easiest thing of all is to pass judgment on what is substantial and meaningful. It is much more difficult to get a real grip on it, and what is the most difficult of all is both to grasp what unites each of them, and to give a full exposition of what that is. 4. The beginning both of cultural education and of working one's way out of the immediacy of substantial life must always be done by acquainting oneself with universal principles and points of view. Having done that, one can then work oneself up to the thought of what is at stake, and, of no less importance, to giving reasons for supporting or refuting one's thoughts on those matters. One must grasp the subject matter's concrete and rich fullness, according to its determinateness, and one must know both how to provide an orderly account of it and to render a serious judgment about it. However, the commencement of cultural education will first of all also have to carve out some space for the seriousness of a fulfilled life, which in turn leads one to the experience of the crux of the matter, so that even when the seriousness of the concept does go into the depths of the crux of the matter, this kind of acquaintance and judgment will still retain its proper place in conversation. 5. The true shape in which truth exists can only be the scientific system of that truth. To participate in the collaborative effort at bringing philosophy nearer to the form of science, to bring it nearer to the goal where it can lay aside the title of love of knowing and be actual knowing, is the task I have set for myself. The inner necessity that knowing should be science lies in the nature of knowing, and the satisfactory explanation for this inner necessity is solely the exposition of philosophy itself. However, external necessity insofar as this is grasped in a universal manner, and insofar as personal contingencies and individual motivations are set aside, is the same as the internal necessity which takes on the shape in which time presents the existence of its moments. To demonstrate that it is now time for philosophy to be elevated into science would therefore be the only true justification of any attempt that has this as its aim, because it would demonstrate the necessity of that aim, and, at the same time, it would be the realization of the aim itself. So what Hegel is saying is the attempt to turn philosophy into a science would require a scientific philosophy to bring it about. So it requires the actuality of a philosophy of science to create such a philosophy of science, or a scientific philosophy. 6. In positing that the true shape of truth lies in its scientific rigor, or, what is the same thing, in asserting that truth has the element of its existence solely in concepts, I do know that this seems to contradict an idea, along with all that follows from it, whose pretentiousness is matched only by its pervasiveness in the convictions of the present age. It thus does not seem completely gratuitous to offer an explanation of this contradiction, even though at this stage such an explanation can amount to little more than the same kind of dogmatic assurance which it opposes. What's the contradiction? In positing that the true shape of truth lies in its scientific rigor, or what is the same thing, in asserting that truth has the element of existence solely in concepts, contradicts the idea whose pretentiousness is matched only by its pervasiveness in the conviction of the present age. It thus does not seem completely gratuitous to offer an explanation of this contradiction, even though at this stage such an explanation can amount to little more than the same kind of dogmatic assurance which it opposes. Okay, he hasn't said the contradiction. He's just talking about contradictions. The contradiction to the idea that the shape of truth is in scientific rigor, um, in saying that the truth has the element of its existence in its concepts. So the concepts bring to light the truth, and the truth lies in the shape of scientific rigor. Confusing. Hmm. I'm sure that I'm not. I'm sure that I'm the first person to say that Hegel's confusing. Okay. Anyway, however much that is to say, the true exists only in what, or rather exists only as what, is at one time called intuition, and at another time called either the immediate knowing of the absolute, or religion, or being, not at the center of divine love, but the being of divine love itself. Still, if that is taken as the point of departure, what is at the same time demanded in the exposition of philosophy is going to be instead the very opposite of the form of the concept. The absolute is not supposed to be conceptually grasped, but rather to be felt and intuited. It is not the concept, but the feeling and intuition of the absolute which are supposed to govern what is said of it. So we have the truth, which is existing in intuition, and this intuition is supposed to tell us what this truth is. Okay, so it's like a self-confirming prophecy. The truth is this, I intuit because it follows by my intuition. And the intuition is not meeting any roadblocks. The intuition is coming to be in this divine way, as Hegel says it, where what is posited is accepted just as much simultaneously. 7. If such a requirement is grasped in its more general concept, and if its appearance is viewed from the stage at which self-conscious spirit is presently located, then spirit has gone beyond the substantial life which it had otherwise been leading in the element of thought. It has gone beyond this immediacy of faith, beyond the satisfaction and security of the certainty that consciousness had about its reconciliation with the essence, and it has gone beyond the universal present, or the inner as well as the outer of that essence. What? Okay, redo. 7. If such a requirement, what is this requirement? This idea that the intuition is confirming what is intuited. Okay, and this is like the proper method of truth. If such a requirement is grasped in its more general context, and if its appearance is viewed from the stage at which self-conscious spirit is presently located, then spirit has gone beyond the substantial life which it had otherwise been leading in the element of thought. So the spirit's not stuck where it is in that moment of intuition. It has gone beyond this immediacy of faith, beyond the satisfaction and security of the certainty that consciousness had about its reconciliation with the essence. And it has gone beyond the universal present, or the inner as well as the outer of that essence. Spirit has not only gone beyond that to the opposite extreme of a reflection of itself into itself, which is utterly devoid of substance. It has gone beyond that extreme too. Not only has its essential life been lost to it, it is conscious of this, and of the finitude that is its content. Turning itself away from such left-over dregs, spirit, while both confessing to being mired in wickedness and reviling itself for being so, now demands from philosophy, not knowledge of what spirit is, rather, it demands that it again attain that substantiality and the solidity of what is, and that it is through philosophy that it attain this. To meet these needs, philosophy is not supposed so much to unlock substance's secret and elevate this to self-consciousness, not so much to bring chaotic consciousness back to a well thought out order and to the simplicity of the concept, but instead to take what thought has torn asunder and then to stir it altogether into a smooth melange, to suppress the concept that makes those distinctions, and then to fabricate the feeling of that essence, feeling of the essence. What it wants from philosophy is not so much insight as edification. The beautiful, the holy, the eternal, religion, and love itself are all the bait required to awaken the craving to bite. What is supposed to sustain and extend the wealth of that substance is not the concept, but ecstasy, not the cold forward march of the necessity of subject matter, but instead a kind of inflamed inspiration. 8. Corresponding to this requirement is the laborious and almost petulant zeal to save mankind from its absorption in the sensuous, the vulgar, and the singular. It wishes to direct people's eyes to the stars, as if they had totally forgotten the divine, and as if they were like worms, each and all on the verge of finding satisfaction in mere dirt and water. There was a time when people had a heaven adorned with a comprehensive wealth of thoughts and images. The meaning of all existence lay in the thread of light by which it was bound to heaven, and instead of lingering in this present, people's view followed that thread upwards towards the divine essence. Their view directed itself, if one may put it this way, to an otherworldly present. It was only under duress that spirit's eyes had to be turned back to what is earthly, and to be kept fixed there, and a long time was needed to introduce clarity into the dullness and confusion lying in the meaning of things in this world, a kind of clarity which only heavenly things used to have. A long time was needed both to draw attention to the present as such, an attention that was called experience, and to make it interesting and to make it matter. Now it seems that there is the need for the opposite, that our sense of things is so deeply rooted in the earthly that an equal power is required to elevate it above that. Spirit has shown itself to be so impoverished that it seems to yearn for its refreshment only in the meager feelings of divinity, very much like the wanderer in the desert who longs for a simple drink of water. That it now takes so little to satisfy spirit's needs is the full measure of the magnitude of its loss. You see us getting satisfied by a 5-second video that doesn't truly fulfill us? We've lost this attachment to something bigger than us, is what Hegel's getting at here. 9. All the same, this parsimony vis-a-vis what one receives, or this stinginess vis-a-vis what one gives. What is vis-a-vis? If I don't know if you know, and I couldn't explain it, so let's figure this out. Opposite, against, in contrast to. Okay, so in words that I understand, all the same, the parsimony opposite to what one receives, or the stinginess opposite to what one gives, is inappropriate for science. Whoever seeks mere edification, who wants to surround the manifoldness of his existence and thought in a kind of fog, and who then demands an indeterminate enjoyment of this indeterminate divinity, may look wherever he pleases to find it, and he will quite easily find the resources to enable him both to get on his high horse and then to rant and rave. What? Redo. All the same time, parsimony. You know what? I think I got caught up on this word because I don't know what this means neither. Parsimony. Extreme unwillingness to spend money or use resources. Okay, where are we here? Apologies for the disruptions, but like these words have fallen out of regular vocab. So parsimony is now like a reluctance to use things. It's almost a stinginess, which he says afterwards, but there's the nuance. So 9. All the same, this parsimony vis-a-vis what one receives, or the stinginess vis-a-vis what one gives, is inappropriate for science. Whoever seeks mere edification, who wants to surround the manifoldness of his existence and thought in a kind of fog, and who then demands an indeterminate enjoyment of this indeterminate divinity, may look wherever he pleases to find it, and he will quite easily find the resources to enable him both to get on his high horse and then to rant and rave. However, philosophy must keep up its guard against the desire to be edifying. Uh, okay. 10. Even to a lesser extent must this kind of science renouncing self-satisfaction claim that such enthusiasm and obscurantism is itself a bit higher than science. The prophetic prattle imagines that it resides at the center of things, indeed, that it is profundity itself, and, viewing determinateness, the horos. What is the horos? What is the horos? I'm a whore for the horos. Am I? The boundary, or a stone placed to mark a boundary marker. That's nice. Um, my boundaries are not even set at the likes of being a Hegel whore. I have no horos to mark the limits of my love for this man. Okay, the prophetic prattle imagines that it resides at the center of things, indeed, that it is profundity itself, and viewing determinateness, the horos, with contempt, it intentionally stands aloof from both the concept and from necessity, which it holds to be a type of reflection, at home in mere finitude. However, in the way that there is an empty breadth, there is also an empty depth, just as likewise there is an extension of substance which spills over into finite diversity without having the power to keep that diversity together. This is an intensity without content, which, although it makes out as if it were a sheer force without dispersion, is in fact no more than superficiality itself. The force of spirit is only as great as its expression, and its depth goes only as deep as it trusts itself to disperse itself and to lose itself in its explication of itself. At the same time, if this substantial knowing, itself so totally devoid of the concept, pretends to have immersed the very ownness of the self in the essence, and to philosophize in all holiness and truth, then what it is really doing is just concealing from itself the fact that instead of devoting itself to God, it has, by spurning all moderation and determinateness, instead simply given itself free rein within itself to the contingency of that content, and then, within the content, given free rein to its own arbitrariness, while abandoning themselves to the unbounded fermentation of the substance. The proponents of that view suppose that, by throwing a blanket over self-consciousness, and by surrendering all understanding, they are God's very own, and that they are those to whom God imparts wisdom in their sleep. What they in fact receive and what they give birth to in their sleep are, for that reason, also only dreams. 11. Besides, it is not difficult to see that our own epoch is a time of birth and a transition to a new period. Spirit has broken with the previous world of its existence, and in its way of thinking, and in its ways of thinking. It is now of a mind to let them recede into the past and to immerse itself into its own work at reshaping itself. To be sure, spirit is never to be conceived as being at rest, but rather as ever advancing. However, just as with a child, who after a long silent period of nourishment draws his first breath and shatters the gradualness of only quantitative growth, it makes a qualitative leap and is born. So too, in bringing itself to cultural maturity, spirit ripens slowly and quietly into its new shape, dissolving bit by bit the structure of its previous world, whose tottering condition is only intimated by its individual symptoms. The kind of frivolity and boredom which chips away at the established order and the indeterminate presentiment of what is yet unknown are all harbingers of imminent change. This gradual process of dissolution, which has not altered the physiognomy of the whole, is interrupted by the break of day, which in a flash and at a single stroke brings to view the structure of the new world. 12. Yet this newness is no more completely actual than is the newborn child, and it is essential to bear this in mind. Its immediacy, or its concept, is the first to come on the scene. However, just as little of a building is finished when its foundation has been laid, so too reaching the concept of the whole is equally as little as the whole itself. When we wish to see an oak with its powerful trunk, its spreading branches, and its mass of foliage, we are not satisfied if instead we are shown an acorn. In the same way, science, the crowning glory of a spiritual world, is not completed in its initial stages. The beginning of a new spirit is the outcome of a widespread revolution in the diversity of forms of cultural formation. It is both the prize at the end of a winding path, just as it is the prize won through much struggle and effort. It is the whole which has returned into itself from out of its succession and extension, and has come to be the simple concept of itself. The actuality of this simple whole consists in those embodiments which, having become moments of the whole, again develop themselves anew and give themselves a figuration, but this time in their new element, in the new meaning which itself has come to be. 13. On the one hand, while the initial appearance of the new world is just the whole enshrouded in its simplicity, on its universal ground, still, on the other hand, the wealth of its bygone existence is in recollection still current for consciousness. In that newly appearing shape, consciousness misses both the dispersal and the particularization of content, but it misses even more the development of the form, as a result of which the differences are securely determined, and are put into the order of their fixed relationships. Without this development, science has no general intelligibility, and it seems to be the esoteric possession of only a few individuals. An esoteric possession, because at first science is only available in its concept, or in what is internal to it, and it is the possession of a few individuals, since its appearance is this not yet fully unfurled form, makes its existence into something wholly singular. Only what is completely determinate is at the same time exoteric, comprehensible, and capable of being learned and possessed by everybody. The intelligible form of science is the path offered to everyone and equally available for all. To achieve rational knowledge through our own intellect is the rightful demand of a consciousness which is approaching the status of science. This is so because the understanding is thinking, the pure I as such, and because what is intelligible is what is already familiar and common, both to science and to the unscientific consciousness alike, and it is that through which unscientific consciousness is immediately enabled to enter into science. And we stop here at around the 40-minute mark.